welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a pretty interesting and maybe eye-opening set of notes.
Yeah, we've got this compilation, David DeAngelo, Double Your Dating What Every Man Should Know.
Right, and I think it's really crucial upfront to understand where this is coming from. This isn't exactly standard academic fare.
No, not at all. The author makes it really clear, actually. It's presented as his opinion, you know, stuff he's figured out from his research, his testing, real-world observations.
And he specifically says it's for, what, personal entertainment? Not actual legal or personal advice.
Exactly. So we need to keep that in mind. We're exploring one particular viewpoint here based on his experiences.
Okay. So our mission then is basically to navigate these observations. We're looking for those maybe surprising nuggets, the thought-provoking bits about communication, attraction, relationships.
Specifically from this male perspective he presents, looking at how he advises men to interact with women, what does he think works?
Got it. So let's jump into the foundational idea he starts with.
Okay, so the absolute fundamental premise, the thing everything else kind of builds on, is his assertion that men and women...
Well, they think differently.
Right. They want different things, often.
Yeah, and he really warns against assuming that what a woman needs or wants is going to line up perfectly with what you, as a man, might assume or want yourself.
He suggests that what women desire might not always seem logical, at least not from a typically male viewpoint.
Precisely. And his big takeaway from that isn't about debating what should make sense logically, but focusing purely on what works.
So it's very results-driven. Look at the outcome, not just the logical steps you think should lead there.
It's about observing patterns, he argues, rather than just sticking to your own assumptions about fairness or logic and attraction.
Okay, interesting start. Then he brings in this analogy, the button thing.
Ah, yes, the button analogy. It's quite memorable. He paints this picture, right? Some guys just seem to effortlessly trigger attraction.
We all know someone like that, probably. That natural charisma or confidence. Exactly. And he uses this metaphor, like they instinctively know how to push the attraction button in women.
But for the rest of us, maybe?
Yeah.
Who don't feel like we have that button pre-installed?
Well, that's where his advice comes in. He argues you need to learn how to install the button.
Okay, how does he suggest doing that? It sounds kind of technical.
It's less about technical steps and more about mindset and behavior.
Yeah.
He says it's about consciously focusing on the feelings you evoke.
Right, making her feel good.
Yes, but crucially, he stresses behaving as if you genuinely, confidently believe you can make a woman feel wonderful.
So it's that act as if idea, embodying the confidence even if you're not quite feeling it yet.
Kind of. He wants you to think, okay, how does a guy who knows he can make women feel amazing act? How does he talk? How does he carry himself? The idea is that projecting that belief can actually start to create the reality.
Interesting. Okay, now the next bit feels, well, it goes against some common advice, maybe. This idea about giving versus resentment.
Yeah, this one's definitely counterintuitive. He touches on this paradox where, okay, women might accept gifts, favors, constant agreement.
Stuff guys might do thinking it's showing interest or being nice.
Exactly. But, he argues, they can actually end up resenting the guy who gives too much or acts like what he bluntly calls an ass kisser.
Why? What's the reasoning there?
His take is that it often comes across as being driven by fear of her leaving, fear of not being good enough. It signals neediness, not confidence.
So the constant giving might actually push her away.
That's the paradoxical idea he presents, that this overly accommodating behavior can lower attraction. His suggested alternative is, well, be different.
Different how?
Have your own standards. Expect some reciprocity.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to, challenge things you don't agree with, but do it in a cool, kind of indifferent way, not aggressively.
Maybe even use some lighthearted teasing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about creating a dynamic where you're not just desperately seeking approval. You have your own frame.
It definitely pushes back against just being agreeable all the time. Okay, so if that's the foundation, where does he go next? What actually does attract women, according to him?
Right, so building on that, he lays out what he calls the 6 things that attract women. You ready for the list?
Lay it on me.
Okay. According to the book, number 1, personality. 2, how you make her feel. 3, your lifestyle.
Okay.
4, your opinions. 5, your appearance. And 6, your genetics, the stuff you can't really change.
6 things. And does he rank them? or give them different weights?
Oh, definitely. Personality is presented as the absolute heavyweight champion.
Really? More than appearance or lifestyle?
That's his argument. He calls it your greatest asset because it's the one thing you have the most control over, the thing you can actively develop.
And he thinks a strong personality can make up for perceived flaws elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the claim, that it can overcome perceived shortcomings in the other areas. So naturally, he then dives deeper into what kind of personality traits he means.
Okay, let's break some of those down. What kind of traits are we talking about?
It's a pretty long list, actually. He starts with funny, calls it incredibly powerful.
Humor. Okay, makes sense.
Then intelligent and creative. But he adds a caveat, attractive, when used interestingly, to surprise or intrigue, not just to show off.
It's not just rattling off facts.
Right. Educated is similar, attractive if woven in well, but can be intimidating in a bad way if not.
Quite else.
Classy and cultured. He says this gets noticed having some style, some appreciation for, finer things or different experiences.
Okay.
Dominant is on the list. He links this to sort of unconscious, maybe primal attraction. Not domineering, but dominant in your own life.
A fine line there, maybe.
Potentially. Then thoughtful, but the emphasis is on the thought being the symbol. The gesture itself matters more than the cost or size.
Like remembering something small.
Exactly, which ties into the next one. Notices significant details. He points out women often appreciate when you notice specifics they put effort into.
Good point. Okay, keep them coming.
Then there's a paradox. Unpredictable, predictable.
How does that work?
He argues that early on, unpredictability keeps things exciting, sparks interest. But for long-term husband material, predictability offers security. So different stages maybe require different balances.
Interesting. What about general vibe?
Yeah, enthusiastic, fun, happy. Says these are infectious qualities. People are drawn to positivity.
Sure.
Adventurous, seen as exciting, adds a bit of sex appeal. Aggressive, but he clarifies this means passion for goals, drive, not aggression towards people or, obviously, anything harmful.
Okay, important clarification.
Then confident cocky. He describes this as like mild overconfidence but balanced with humor. Not arrogance, but a playful self-assuredness.
That cocky and funny thing again.
Seems to be a recurring theme. Also having expertise in something. Attractive if you can share it engagingly, not boastfully.
Like being passionate about a hobby.
Attention. But interestingly, he suggests hinted attention is often more powerful than constant, overt focus.
Leaving them wanting more, maybe.
Could be. And romantic imagination and perspective, seeing inner beauty beyond the superficial.
Deeper qualities.
Yeah. And two more big ones. Being an expert in body language, understanding those nonverbal signals women send.
Which are constant, he implies.
Right. And finally, sexual mastery. He calls this instantly addictive. So, yeah, quite a comprehensive list of traits he thinks matter.
Definitely a lot to unpack there in terms of personality.
Okay, this leads into another concept he talks about, tests.
Ah, yes, the idea of tests. He suggests women, maybe especially attractive women who get a lot of male attention, might subconsciously test guys.
Test them how? Like quizzes?
Oh, no, not like that. More like subtle challenges or questions designed to see how the guy reacts.
And what's the point of these tests, according to him?
The theory presented is that it's a way to gauge things like his strength, his self-control, whether he's easily manipulated, or if he'll just agree with everything, become a yes man.
To see if he'll remain in charge of himself, essentially. That seems to be the core idea. Will he maintain his own frame, his own sense of direction?
So what's the advice? Just try to pass the tests.
Actually, no, it's quite the opposite. He advises challenging the tests
How?
by not necessarily giving direct answers to questions that feel like tests, by maybe teasing back a bit, and crucially, by not always giving her exactly what she seems to be asking for in that moment.
That sounds risky or counterintuitive again.
It does, right. But his logic is that by not being easily led or manipulated, by holding your ground in a cool way, you're ironically demonstrating the very qualities she might be subconsciously looking for.
Which are strength, control, self-assuredness.
Exactly. You're showing you won't just roll over. You're giving her what he claims she really wants, which is a man who is confidently in control of himself in the interaction.
Okay. And underpinning a lot of this, it sounds like, is humor.
Oh, absolutely. He presents humor as possibly the single most important skill a guy can develop for attraction.
More important than looks? Money. Height.
He suggests it can potentially outweigh all of those. But importantly, it's not just about, memorizing jokes.
Right, not being a stand-up comic necessarily.
No, the focus is much more on developing that cocky and funny character persona we talked about. It's about a way of interacting.
Does he give examples of the type of humor?
Yeah, he mentions things like using sarcasm playfully, exaggeration for comedic effect, deliberately misinterpreting things she says in a funny way. It's about creating that light, teasing, confident vibe.
Okay. Now, here's another tactic that might raise some eyebrows, the let's be friends thing.
Right, using that line preemptively. He suggests maybe even dropping it early on, like when setting up a first meeting.
Why would you do that? Isn't that shooting yourself in the foot?
Well, the theory he puts forward is that it can actually create intrigue. It flips the script. Suddenly, she might feel a need to prove she's more than just friend material. It's a bit of reverse psychology, maybe.
Creates a challenge. Interesting. What else? There's something about ending interactions.
Yeah, he draws on advice sometimes given to women, actually, like from the book, The Rules. He strongly recommends always being the one to end the interaction first.
End the phone call first, end the day first, end the chat first.
All of it. The rationale presented is that women enjoy the mystery. Leaving things slightly unfinished, ending on a high note, makes them wonder about you, keeps them thinking.
Leaves them wanting more. Again, creates that sense of anticipation.
That's the idea. It prevents things from dragging or fizzling out.
Okay. Let's shift gears slightly to communication style. He talks about indirect communication.
He highlights that women often appreciate communication that's not always direct and literal. Things like using metaphors, telling relevant stories, expressing care subtly rather than overtly gushing.
And this mismatched communication idea, what's that?
That's where your words might say one thing, but your tone or body language says something slightly different, creating an interesting tension. Like maybe saying something slightly challenging or teasing, but with a warm tone and affectionate body language. Or being serious verbally while saying something complimentary. It creates layers, makes things less straightforward.
Keeps things from being too flat.
Yeah, adds dimension. And this feeds right into the general theme of unpredictability.
Ah, right. Being too predictable is bad, apparently.
He really emphasizes this. If she can always guess exactly what you're going to say or do next, he argues, boredom sets in quickly.
So the advice is to mix it up. Do unexpected things.
Pretty much. Maybe say no playfully to something small, like an initial kiss attempt, only to initiate one yourself later. Or vary the types of dates you suggest, just avoid falling into a predictable rut.
Keep her on her toes, basically.
That seems to be the goal, yeah. Keep the interaction dynamic.
Okay, let's talk nonverbals. Voice tone, body language. How important are those in his view?
Hugely important. He quotes those, common figures suggesting nonverbals account for the vast majority, like over 90% of communication's impact compared to the actual words used.
Wow, 93% versus 7% for words, I think is the classic stat often cited.
Something like that. So logically, he advises working on these aspects, developing a deeper, more resonant voice tone, for example.
And body language.
Big focus there. Things like maintaining an upright, confident posture, moving a bit more slowly and deliberately, not fidgeting nervously, holding comfortable, sustained eye contact.
Not staring intensely, but not looking away constantly either.
Exactly. And also just comfortably taking up space. Not shrinking yourself down, but owning your presence physically.
Makes sense. Confident body language signals confidence, generally. What about tricky questions? Does he offer ways to handle those?
Yeah, he introduces a technique called evasive action for questions you might not want to answer directly or that feel like traps.
Okay, how does evasive action work?
The idea is you give a sort of vague general answer that sounds like it could be what they want to hear, but then you immediately follow it up with something humorous, often kind of absurd or exaggerated, to deflect and change the tone.
So you acknowledge it slightly, then pivot hard with humor.
That's the gist. Keep it light. Don't get drawn into justifying yourself or giving away too much if you don't want to.
Got it. Okay, shifting to more practical stuff. Preparation.
Right. Just a brief mention, but he stresses being prepared if you invite a woman back to your place.
Basic hosting duties?
Yeah, like having something to drink, available water, maybe something else. And importantly, having protection readily accessible, just being a prepared adult, essentially.
Sensible advice. What about skills? He mentions cooking.
He does, yeah. He actually presents learning to cook as a really valuable skill for dating.
Why? Just to impress with a meal?
That's part of it, sure. It can be romantic, shows effort, but also practical, saves money. healthier.
Hmm.
And he frames it as showing you're, like, well-rounded, capable, suggests starting simple, doesn't have to be gourmet.
Okay. And chivalry. Is that still a thing in his book?
Apparently so. He mentions traditional chivalrous acts, opening doors, pulling out a chair sometimes if the situation feels right, not awkwardly, walking on the outside of the sidewalk.
Gestures of consideration, basically.
Yeah, he presents them as simple things that many women still notice and appreciate, shows awareness and respect.
Okay, so where should guys actually meet women, according to this?
The advice is pretty logical, actually. Go where the kind of women you want to meet are likely to be.
So figure out your type or shared interests and go to those places. Hobby groups, social events, specific venues.
Exactly. And then don't be afraid to approach directly. He suggests maybe starting with an opinion question about the surroundings or event to open a conversation.
What about online? Was that a thing when he wrote this?
Yeah, he mentions it specifically AOL back then, which dates it a bit, but he saw it as a good place to, like, practice conversation skills, test out approaches with lower stakes.
Interesting. Practice ground. Okay, and he had a specific take on phone numbers versus email.
He did. He actually suggested that getting an email address might be more effective for that initial follow-up than just a phone number.
Why email?
Presented as less pressure, maybe, less intrusive, gives her more control over when and how she responds initially. He even described a specific kind of playful way to try and get both the email and the phone number during the first interaction.
Ah, clever. Okay, then there's this idea about categorization.
He posits that women tend to categorize men fairly quickly. The main categories he focuses on are long-term relationship potential versus just sex material, or the dreaded friend zone.
Right. And his advice is what? Try to steer the categorization.
Essentially, yeah. Be aware of the behaviors that might lead you to be instantly filed under just a friend, or perhaps even nice guy but no spark, and actively avoid those if you're interested romantically.
Got it. So let's say you've met someone, got contact info. What about the first actual meeting, like the coffee date?
Okay, yeah, he has very specific advice for the first coffee meeting. First, maybe suggest meeting somewhere relatively close to your place. Partly, but maybe also sets up the possibility of easily inviting her back later if things go well. He also stresses being punctual. Big point on punctuality.
Good advice, generally.
And remember that let's be friends line. He suggests maybe dropping that in casually early on during the coffee.
Still using that tactic?
Yeah.
Okay. What about demeanor?
Act like you're not overly invested or impressed. Relaxed. He specifically mentions leaning back physically, creating comfortable space. Don't lean in eagerly the whole time.
Projecting coolness, non-neediness?
That's the vibe, and a big one. Don't go heavy on compliments about her looks right away.
Really? Why not?
His reasoning is that attractive women hear compliments on their looks constantly. It doesn't make you stand out. Focus on personality, connection, the conversation itself.
Makes sense. Okay, so after coffee, if things progress.
He suggests maybe moving beyond just sitting and talking. Doing something is his term.
Like an activity.
Yeah, maybe walking around an interesting neighborhood, browsing shops, something that allows for more natural interaction and conversation flow than just staring across a table, less like an interview.
More dynamic, okay.
Yeah.
And then the potentially tricky part, taking the next step, getting physical.
Right. He outlines a specific scenario, assuming you've ended up back near or at your place after the coffee or activity.
Right.
He suggests a playful line like, okay, you can come in, but just for a few minutes. Keeps it light, low pressure. Then inside, look for indicators of interest. He mentions something called the hair stroke test, playfully touching her hair to see if she leans in or pulls away.
A physical gauge of comfort level.
Seems like it. From there, it's about gradual escalation, maybe smelling her hair subtly, moving closer for some cuddling on the couch, light teasing, before going for a kiss.
So building comfort and anticipation first.
Exactly. And a key point he makes is to let her initiate some of the physical advances, too. Don't force the pace. He even suggests a playful line if she seems hesitant but interested, like, just say please.
Giving her agency, but keeping it playful. Okay. That covers the initial stages. What about keeping things going long term?
Yeah, he addresses that. He acknowledges that the initial, intoxicating brain chemicals of a new relationship, the infatuation stage, tend to fade. Usually around 12 to 18 months, he estimates.
Replaced by what? The stability chemicals? Like oxytocin?
Something like that, a different kind of bond forms. But to keep the attraction alive long term, his advice is basically don't stop doing the things that worked initially.
So keep being fun, interesting, somewhat unpredictable.
Yep. Keep noticing the details, doing thoughtful things. Don't fall completely into that predictable routine. Maintain the effort.
And interestingly, he adds a point about giving in a relationship.
Right. He suggests that in a committed long-term relationship, you should actually aim to give more than you receive, which kind of contrasts with his earlier warning about overgiving from a place of neediness.
So the context matters. Giving from a place of strength and generosity in an established relationship is different.
That seems to be the distinction, yeah. It's about maintaining the value and appreciation over time.
Okay. Wow. So we've really covered a lot of ground here from Double Your Dating.
Definitely. A whole range of ideas.
Yeah, some key themes that really stand out are, his whole focus on understanding these perceived differences between men and women's thinking.
Uh-huh. That fundamental premise.
The huge emphasis he puts on personality and especially that cocky and funny humor.
Right. As maybe the biggest levers you can pull.
And then, yeah, some pretty unconventional strategies maybe for how to build attraction and handle interactions. Challenging tests, ending things first, the friends line.
It certainly provides, well, a lot to think about, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you consider his emphasis on things like perceived control or the value he places on unpredictability.
Yeah, and this idea of challenging expectations as a way to build connection. How do these concepts, as he presents them, sit with you? How do they match up or maybe clash with your own experiences or understanding of relationships?
That's a great question for listeners to ponder. What parts of this feel particularly surprising or even, like, counterintuitive? And maybe why might that be?
Exactly, because remember, this is just one perspective we've explored today. It's a really complex area, human connection.
Absolutely. And looking at different viewpoints, even ones that might seem controversial or unusual, can definitely lead to a richer, more nuanced understanding in the end.
Well said. Definitely food for thought.